Hey everyone, welcome to the Generation Y Conservative. I'm glad you could join us. Tonight's topics, we're talking about entertainment news, including news in regards to the Peter Rabbit movie and Black Panther. By the way, don't ever mix those two animals up together. It's not going to be a good mix. Also, in education news, besides what's going on with our main story tonight, which we'll get to, some crazy things happening in the world of public education that you should know about. Also, political news like that of San Francisco, which is seeing a mass exodus right now because of liberal policies. We also have Elizabeth Warren, who's showing up to a conference, and you won't believe what kind. Also, a man has a possible new gender type that he would like to be classified as that you may be interested in as well. And of course, our main topic tonight is we're talking about the school shooting that happened down in Parkland, Florida. It's a tragic event. We're going to talk about all the angles of that and what's going on and where the national conversation is right now and things that should be discussed because the discussion needs to be had. So we're going to talk about those things and more tonight. This is a Generation Y Conservative podcast. Hey everyone, welcome to the Generation Y Conservative podcast. I'm glad that you could join us where the truth is greater than agenda, and that is no more important than right now, trust me, when we get to these topics tonight. If you're following along with me, you can always find me on Facebook. Just search for the Generation Y Conservative, hit the like button, share it with friends. You can also get notifications for when we go live. This happens to be one of the very few podcasts where we don't go live with it during the week because my co-host is sick and I'm flying solo tonight. So Mike, we hope you feel better. Also, you can find me on Twitter at Gen Y Conservative without the E on the end. And most importantly, I always suggest that you go to our YouTube channel, The Generation Y Conservative, hit subscribe and also the bell on there to get notifications when we upload new content because content creators that are conservative are pushed to the bottom of the stack, even if they are very popular. So if you're a conservative, I encourage you to go over to the pages and follow along with them and share them as much as possible. And let's grow this movement because now more than ever, it's very much needed. Also, if you're interested, you can always listen to this podcast again on Sundays at 3 p.m. in the afternoon on KLRN Internet Radio. They have also been gracious enough to put my podcast on their iTunes account. So if you search the iTunes store for the Generation Y Conservative, it will come up as the Generation Y Conservative by KLRN Internet Radio. So you can always listen to the podcast while you're or working out. So just go ahead and do that as well. So let's talk about some entertainment news. According to comicbook.com, the Peter Rabbit movie is facing a boycott over a food allergy bullying scene. The movie, which earned just over $25 million at the box office this weekend, has come under fire on social media for a joke about food allergies, and many on Twitter are calling for the movie to be boycotted for its insensitivity. In the film, one of the characters has a severe allergy to blackberries. So right off the bat, we know we're in trouble with this one. Peter Rabbit and his friend choose to exploit and make light of this condition, pelting the said character with blackberries despite knowing of his condition. The duo then laughed as if to say the character's struggles with the allergy was a fun situation. So, So it says, the one Twitter user named Tom Murray said, "Warning, for those who have children that live with food allergies, like mine, do not go to see the Peter Rabbit movie. Finding humor in bullying by Peter and friends to an allergy friend who then needs an EpiPen is sickening. Shame on Sony Pictures. Hashtag boycott Peter Rabbit." So, I want to give you a little backstory. I probably should have done this first before we got into this whole thing. 8 years ago, yes, eight years ago, I had lymphoma cancer, okay? And one of the things that got me through that was, number one, first and foremost, God and prayer from many people, and including me, myself, and my family and everything too. But beyond that was a positive attitude and a good sense of humor. During that whole ordeal, I dropped about 30 pounds. lost a lot of weight, and definitely looked like someone who was sick from cancer. And I said, since my cancer type was lymphoma, I always joked that I was on a new dieting plan called Slimphoma. And I was usually the only one laughing at that because I had some nervous laughter from friends wondering if they could get away with laughing at such a thing. And I encouraged it. I mean, come on. If you have a condition, if you can't laugh at that condition and have a positive attitude and spirit about it, then this is ridiculous. The lengths to which we're going to for people to be absolutely sheltered in not only their own little bubbles, but bubble wrapped around those bubbles and insulated on top of that, and then steel cages around that. It's just getting to the point where it's absolutely ridiculous. We are looking for reasons to hate one another anymore and just despise certain situations and find offense to everything. It's getting to the point where it's really ridiculous. So Peter the Rabbit had a good opening weekend. From what I understand, the movie was pretty good for kids, besides the bullying scene that happened. So one user actually disagreed with Tom Murray on this one, and they wrote, I almost died from a food allergy induced anaphylactic shock, and I think the people freaking out about this are out of their minds. I'd honestly rather die of anaphylaxis than live in the hypersensitive, watered down, feelings before fact world they want to create. Amen. That's all. I completely agree. So while we're talking about movies and Hollywood and entertainment and everything, another movie is getting a lot of flack as well right now. And I find this one even more fascinating and hilarious. BuzzFeed is reporting that another movie called I Feel Pretty, which is starring Amy Schumer, is facing backlash of its own kind as well. Schumer's character, Renee, struggles with low self-esteem and wants to be pretty and feel the parts of life that open up to you when you're gorgeous, Schumer said in an interview with Ellen. In the film, Renee falls off her bike during a SoulCycle class, then wakes up and starts seeing herself as a supermodel. So, right off the bat, you would think that the left would be actually going insane over the shaming of bodies in this case, but no. Comedian Sophie Hagen, I don't know. It doesn't matter. I've never heard of her, so she can't be that good of a comedian. Raised several points about the trailer, first questioning who it's meant to resonate with. So she tweeted, Amy Schumer is blonde, white, able-bodied, femme, and yes, thin. She is society's beauty ideal. So they give her a ponytail and remove her makeup and suddenly she's ugly? Why not just give her glasses or a fat suit? What is wrong with this world? Who is this meant to resonate with? Before we can enjoy the premise, surely we have to buy into the fact that she is not pretty. How many of us are bigger than her? Are we supposed to accept that this is ugly when it's all we've been taught that we should aim for? Also, how about instead of her hitting her head and damaging her brain in order to become so deluded that she actually thinks she's pretty, she read about capitalism and realize that women's low self-esteem is a patriarchal ploy and that she is worthy of self-love. I mean, she hits her head and then feels beautiful. This movie legit had to become sci-fi for it to be realistic. Only in a magical universe could she possibly feel pretty. Her blonde, white, thin, femme, cis, blah, she's all the things and still she is not considered pretty. So if we jump back here and looking at what this woman said about how about she read about capitalism and realize that women's low self-esteem is a patriarchal ploy and that she is worthy of self-love? We have gone through story after story this year in regards to the podcast and stories we've gone over. Look at BuzzFeed itself, where this article is coming from. Specifically highlighted one of the supermodel Miss America or Miss Universe pageants this year, where instead of giving the body sizes, the women in the pageant gave off statistics about women around the world and what they're going through and you know, abuse and sexual harassment and everything. But they failed to realize that their career is built off of making a show of their bodies. I mean, it's not like suddenly the swimsuits competition was sprang on and they thought, oh my gosh, they're objectifying my body now. What are we going to do? How are we going to go on with this? That is literally what the competition is all about, is really objectifying. Most people laugh when it comes to the Q&A section where they have to answer questions, because it usually turns out to have hilarious answers because the women don't really know what they're talking about. All they're there for is show. So for these women who know that their lives, their careers have been set up and they willingly participate in objectifying their own bodies, to come out and go against the objectifying of bodies made no sense at the time. So here she's talking about capitalism and that capitalism has led to low self-esteem. No, actually, I would argue the opposite of that. In fact, the capitalist society that we live in has allowed people to become whatever body type they want. How much money do gyms that promote CrossFit make? The CrossFit craze and the Spartan races and all those things across the nation have sparked an attitude towards healthier lifestyles. You see people working out all the time. It has to be more people working out now than ever before. And on top of that, if you're looking at the capitalist society, look at what capitalism has led to for our eating habits as opposed to third world nations where they don't have the choice of food. Or look at socialism like Venezuela, where they're murdering zoo animals to find things to eat. So yeah, capitalism has actually led to multiple different body types up to obese sizes. And these people, if that's what they want, should be happy with it. It's not capitalism that's bastardizing the system of women's self-esteem. It's these women themselves. Or in this case here, what I find so fascinating about this article is the fact that the liberal left has now just completely turned on its head, and over the last couple of years, we've seen them eating each other. Amy Schumer, of all people, is one of the most progressive liberal actresses / I guess she considers herself a comedian of some sort. She is the person that is always in the news, along with disasters like Lena Dunham, who are supporting the left and feminism and progressive ideology and everything. And here she is being torn apart by her own people for starring in a film that's supposed to be comedy based. At this point, the rest of us just need to sit back, eat popcorn, and watch this as entertainment instead of actually going to see a movie, which is probably trash anyway. So I would actually encourage you to tune into Twitter and actually follow this type of conversation for it. So again, that movie that's coming out is called I Feel Pretty. All right, so here's one that I've been excited about. I wrote down in regards to a New York Times article on the new movie Black Panther, but since I wrote this script out, there's actually been a couple other news stories that came out in regards to it as well that I just find absolutely fascinating. It's incredible that we've gotten to this point. Let's start off with this. The new Marvel movie that's out, Black Panther, and the New York Times is wondering, can white kids dress as Black Panther? It's a good question. You know why? The New York Times is wondering whether it's appropriate for white parents to buy these products for their kids, and if white kids should dress as Black Panther at all. As parents, or even as the people creating costumes, we need to be very aware of what that says. One professor of early childhood education told the New York Times, "There's not a whole lot of black superheroes, so this is a really important thing for black kids growing up." In their own article, Bozeman, Black Panther himself, says that he finds joy in seeing all races of children dress up as his character. Other members of the cast told the New York Times that they believe that kind of crossover is actually a testament to how impactful the movie is on an increasingly polarized culture. Brigitte Vitrup of Texas Women's College told the Times that any parent allowing their child to dress up as Black Panther must at least discuss with them the concept of, not panther, another P word, privilege. white people have the privilege of not constantly being reminded of their race in the United States, where white is the majority, whereas as a black person, you don't, she said. Okay, so one of the things that they were trying to say in this article was that wearing the Black Panther costume, which you can't even see who's underneath if it's a full costume, is cultural appropriation, which we've been hearing like crazy lately. As a matter of fact, the last costume story that we went over was the Moana costume for her and the big guy that The Rock did the voice for. And that these white kids should not be dressing up as that because it takes away from the native culture of Hawaiians or something. Of course, there's no issue when someone other than a white male dresses up as a Captain America character and costume. And there isn't a problem with that. There shouldn't be a problem with that, just as there shouldn't be a problem with this at all. These are superheroes. They're supposed to be this character that these kids love and idolize in some cases and look up to as a hero for the people, no matter the sex or the color of their skin or anything like that. This is a superhero film. Like, why has it gotten to this point? You look back through history at the way a film like this is being polarized right now for a movie that, by and large, we've been talking about for the last year about how excited we are to go see this, because all these Marvel movies being connected in this whole universe is something that Marvel fans like myself have been looking forward to, and we're really excited to see this movie because of a great cast of characters, and including Angela Bassett, who's in the movie as, I believe, the Queen or something like that. She's on the 911 show and is awesome. So I'm really looking forward to that as well. And Boseman has done a fantastic job of the Panther so far in the Civil War movie. So while we've been talking about this movie for the last year on a political podcast, at no point in time have we brought up anything political about it. We've just been excited to actually go and see it. But in the last couple weeks, leading right up to the release of the movie, it's become politically polarized and racially divisive as well. Beyond the fact that the New York Times is actually wondering if white kids should be able to dress up as this, you also have the fact that some people are wondering if it's even okay for a white person to actually go and see the movie. And it's coming actually from both sides. Some people in the black community are saying that, let this be our thing, allow us to do this. Well, my argument to that would be, if you really want something like this as a movie to succeed and have its sequels and do well and be a symbol for the black community, you should be trying to get as many people in as possible to raise the box office figures so that we can continue having these types of films. Then you have the liberal left, the white liberal left on the other side of the equation, who's wondering if it's insensitive for them to actually go and see a movie like this because it's not part of their culture, and it would be racially insensitive for them to be a white audience member in a black movie. I mean, at what point, what have we gotten to? Honestly, we have moved so far backwards, and I'm sorry, this is not because of Trump. This started in the early 2000s, in the mid 2000s. I don't know where it started happening, but whereas things were getting better, things are seemingly getting worse. And personally, I think it all started around the time when Obama started bashing cops and setting the law enforcement community against the minorities and the minorities against the law enforcement community out to be even worse than they ever had been before. And we were seeing these things across the nation. Trayvon Martin, if I had a son, he would look like Trayvon Martin. What if Donald Trump said that and took advantage of one of these school shooting situations and picked out a white boy victim from it, and to push gun legislation for, protecting the Second Amendment, said, if I had a son, besides my other two sons, he would look like that boy right there. He would be torn apart by the media wolves. It would be unbelievable. It just doesn't make any sense at all. There's one more thing in regards to Black Panther movie. Can't think of it off the top of my head right now, but the fact is, Black Panther is getting rave reviews right now. I know IGN, the site that I follow, gave it a 9 out of 10. Milo Yiannopoulos, of all people, who you would think would pick apart this type of movie, his website, now it wasn't written by him, but his website, Dangerous, actually gave the movie rave reviews as well. So I'm really looking forward to this and hopefully doing a movie review on it as well. So tune into the Generation Y Conservative YouTube channel as I try to get that review up there as well. Okay, so besides our main topic tonight, what is happening in the world of education right now? Well, in Texas, 6th grade students are learning about gay bars and HIV in a bizarre school assignment. 6th grade students in a Texas middle school were sent home with a strange questionnaire which asked them to rank their, quote, level of comfort in different scenarios. The assignment's list of 41 scenarios asked students to rank how comfortable they are with things like a friend invites you to a gay bar and your sister invites her new female-to-male transsexual boyfriend to dinner. We're talking about 6th graders here. So I don't know. 6th graders, I don't know how often they get out to the bar and everything and run into this type of stuff, or, on that rare occasion that cis gendered person in 6th grade gets to a gay bar just to check it out. But, they need to have these types of questions in our public schools, obviously. The teacher who gave out the inappropriate 41 question assignment has been disciplined, according to the Birdville Independent School District. Students were asked to rank how comfortable they were on a scale of 1 to 4 in these types of scenarios. Number 1, your dentist is HIV positive. A friend invites you to a gay bar. Your sister invites her boyfriend home to dinner, and he is a female to male transsexual. So in regards to this, a middle school teacher in Florida was also fired back in last year in 2017 for presenting the same questionnaire to students there. It's too bad this teacher herself or himself didn't do a little bit more research on the assignment and look at what had happened in the past. But this is just another example of how things can go off the deep end when it comes to public education. We live in a time right now where teachers have a handicapped ability where the state standardized tests and all the stuff that's federally mandated by the federal government has chewed down on their time to actually teach creatively. And it puts me into a tough spot. I love teachers. I think they do a great job. That's part of the reason why I got into the school board, was to protect them and the students and the community and just make sure everything was working in harmony, really. But when you see cases like this, I had great teachers that went off on tangents that made our classes interesting and made them memorable and made it so that when we thought about the lesson that we thought about these side stories, where the teacher was acting out something from the history lesson or got us involved in a Jeopardy game for the whole class and everything. So I get a little frustrated when so many federal mandates come down the pipe and it takes away from that creative time for the teacher to actually teach that. But in the case like this, if this is what's going to be considered creative, you're working against my argument here. Now I kind of want the other stuff to take up time, so you're left with not being able to do this crazy crap to our students. I mean, what is going on with this? It doesn't make any sense. But, ask your local 6th grader when you see him out at the gay bar, I guess. And another news story is seeing a high school banning the national anthem at rallies because it's outdated and racially insensitive. So a Ramon, California high school has banned the singing of the Star-Spangled Banner at rallies over its allegedly racist and offensive third verse. Let me repeat that. A Ramon, California, ends there. It's a California school. You shouldn't be surprised from the rest of the story right there. Right off the bat, we're heading into California territory. If it's California, New York, or New Jersey, you know you're in trouble with it already. The national anthem will no longer be sung during California high schools' rallies as a result of the school's associated student body decision to have the song omitted from the school's rally tradition. After learning about the third verse, the other ASB officers and I thought it was completely unacceptable and must be removed from the rally, wrote the student body president. And I'm going to be honest with you. I took her name out of this whole news article in my presentation to you because, I'll be honest with you, beyond the fact that that these students are acting in an asinine way over this being offensive, the fact is, there's a part of this where she is yearning for the attention for her name to be out there as a hero to the social justice warrior crowd. And I refuse to play into that. So she is the student body president, and I'm going to leave it at that. The third verse of the Star-Spangled Banner reads, "No refuge could save the hireling and slave from the terror of flight or the gloom of the grave. And the Star-Spangled Banner in triumph doth wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave." So student body presidents also said, "We understand that this third verse is not included when the anthem is performed. But still, what does this tell us? This verse translated finds joy in the killing of African Americans." No, I disagree. To think that our nation's anthem once had the word slave and land of the free in the same sentence leaves me speechless. Maybe it's her school system that's failing her right now, and that she needs to learn a little bit more about history. So the California high school senior Dennis Florentinos spoke with Todd Starnes' radio show on Tuesday and said that there had been, quote, "a lot of pushback on the removal of the anthem," noting that the criticisms didn't come from only conservative students. Probably because there was a good amount of people on both sides that realized how ridiculous our culture is getting for being offended at everything. So, if we tie things across the pond and here as well, things aren't getting much better in public education either. There's a growing movement to ban best friends. To ban best friends in schools in America and Europe. The movement gained international attention when Prince William and Kate Middleton enrolled their son Prince George in Thomas Battersea Prep School in South London last year. News reports on the school indicated that the school encouraged students to, quote, "be kind to all their peers." Good idea so far. Which include discouraging students from having a, quote, "best friend" in favor of being equal friends with everyone at school. Okay, your whole thing just fell apart here. So we have to talk about basic psychology here for a second. You can talk to kids about trying to push away from the idea of having a best friend, but that's not how the human brain works. We are naturally attracted to certain people, naturally attracted to, in most cases, the opposite sex, people that we're sexually attracted to. I'll just leave it at that. We're naturally attracted to people of similar interests. And because of the way that they act in response to us, sometimes you end up having more time with that person, and that becomes your best friend. There's very little control over that. You can't just start hanging out with a person and go, "Ugh, would you look at the time? I gotta go over there with the other person who I have some stuff in common with just to balance the scales a little bit here, because I don't want to get the public opinion here that we're best friends or anything, because that's illegal. That's banned now." It just gets to be so ridiculous the way that these people think. In the process, if you're paying attention to anything that's going on, the process to promote equality and tolerance, the left has lost their ever-loving mind and gone in completely the opposite direction, and has created an even deeper divide among people. That's just a deepening chasm of divisiveness between people. You can't do anything anymore. In the pursuit of these types of things, they have made things worse for people. So anyway, although Prince George's school only discourages students from having best friends, And the New York Times reports that some schools are considering banning best friends with the enthusiastic support of education experts, which shows you there's not too much going on with the cohesion of those two words right there, educational experts. Clinical psychologist Dr. Barbara Greenberg told WCBS that the idea is catching on in schools. According to Greenberg, there has been a movement in some American schools and European schools to ban the phrase best friend. The idea of banning the phrase best friends is a very intriguing social experiment. Let me stop you again right there. Kids, not my kids, because we homeschool. Kids are not going to school to be social experiments. That is where things are going off the rails today. Okay? Kids are going to learn these subjects and go on so that they could be educated adults and function in society. This is not a time to be switching things up with things like this and having social experiments, things like Common Core. Hey, let's switch up the way everybody does math and throw in some convoluted system where teachers and parents actually have to take classes to learn the Common Core method so that they can actually talk to their own children about how to do their homework. There's something wrong there. The fact that we have gone from a society where in the early 1900s, third graders were given a civil test and were able to pass it, that same civil test now given to adults who are educated can't pass, shows you the degradation of our educational system so far and what it's come to. We are lagging behind other countries, and we keep on trying these social experiments to get things back in line and get us to the back of the top of the chart again. But it's obviously not working. We keep on slipping, and the more liberal we get with things, the worse things are getting. I mean, at what point do we look at the situations and see the things that have unfolded over the years and say, you know what, things were better back at this time. This was a great time for America at this point in time because grades were great, college acceptance rates were incredible, and things were great. Well, we look back, God isn't allowed to be in school anymore. Everything is offensive. You have all these educational standards coming down from a Department of Education full of bureaucrats and not actual educational experts. And the loss of control from the actual local public school boards that then is delegated to the state and federal government under the guise of actually blackmailing these schools into doing certain things under the threat of actually losing funding for the education of that school. We've gone so far off the deep end in pursuit of trying to socially experiment and manipulate our society into this way of thinking, which most would recognize as indoctrination, really, that it's made things worse, and they refuse to see it, and instead they try to come up with even deeper ways of doing it, and it just continues to make things worse. All I can say is thank God we homeschool. I didn't know many homeschoolers growing up, and I am shocked as an adult because of how far our public education has gone off the deep end with things like this crap that we're talking about right here. How many of my personal friends and people we know that are homeschooling now, because you, as a parent, you're just backed into a corner. And unfortunately, we still have to continue to pay property taxes, which goes towards public education, paying for these other kids to be cruelly indoctrinated with nonsense that isn't even going to work for them anyway. I know a couple college professors who teach English classes for college students, and they say consistently across the board, even in higher up colleges up in the Northeast, and I'll leave it at that, where students read and write at a middle school level. How did they get into these colleges? Because the standard bar for everything has come down, because we have dumbed everything down as a society to allow people to pass things so that they aren't upset, so we don't bruise the egos of these children or their parents who become helicopter parents. It's so ridiculous, it's unbelievable. So, coming back in here, clinical psychologist Dr. Barbara Greenberg told WCBS the idea is catching on in schools. According to Greenberg, there has been a movement in America's schools and European schools to ban the phrase best friend. And the idea of the phrase best friends is a very intriguing social experiment, as we were talking about before. She said, I see kids come in all week long who are feeling dreadful because they are excluded and because they are either nobody's best friend or their best friend has moved on. Let's face it, you can't ban somebody from having a close relationship, and you can't really ban somebody from having a best friend. But what the schools are trying to do is foster the idea of kids having more than a single friend. So, if you have children who are feeling excluded, who feel like they don't have a best friend or feel like their best friend has moved on. At this point, we're now talking about a confidence issue, okay? You can't control the actions of others, but you can control the actions of yourself. We do have a confidence problem, okay? And it actually goes both ways. When I was on the school board, we were looking at comparing the Chinese culture to American culture and how those schools reflect on their students and the student bodies within them. And we actually did a program where we exchanged assistant superintendents, because their assistant superintendent came over from China to look at our students and how we learn, and then ours went over there. And the problem that we're facing as a country, and their country as well, is that American students have an overblown sense of confidence that they can do anything and be anything because that's what they were told their whole life. Yet, as we mentioned, the grades and educational standards and everything else are always falling and on the decline. The exact opposite of the situation is happening over in China, where the students are excelling in all their studies, and the kids, like, it's almost mechanical the way that they learn, to the point where there are videos of students who felt so stressed out over a test that they get up from their desk, walk over to the window, and jump out of the high rise to their deaths because they weren't going to be able to pass the test. That's how stringent and how absolutely laser focused they are on education over there. But the problem that they have over in China is that the students lack confidence in almost every sense of the word, okay? So the social experiment, I guess you could say, of having an exchange program for our superintendents was to find out how we can increase the test scores and put more of a focus on education. And they came over to find out, how can we get the confidence of these American kids who are growing up and believing that they could be anything, even if they don't have the grades to actually achieve such a thing. Pretty interesting. The British school movement to ban best friends has been gaining momentum for years, and it now appears to be catching on in the United States, according to Greenberg. So, graffiti artists is the next topic here. We're getting away from education, but this is an unbelievable story. And when I actually read the article, it actually came off like this was a two-sided situation. I don't believe so. Graffiti artists are awarded $6.75 million in damages after a property owner paints over their recognized art on his own property. Graffiti artists were awarded $6.75 million in damages by a federal judge Monday after the owner of the New York City property displaying the revered murals, which had risen to recognized stature, painted over them in 2013, according to the Washington Post. In the 1990s, property owner Gerald Wolkoff rented studios in Long Island City, Queens, warehouse to local artists and began letting graffiti artists spray paint on the building walls, according to the paper. One tenant and artist, Jonathan Cohen, organized a system in which graffiti artists competed for wall space, said the Post, citing court documents. Wolkoff let artists paint whatever they wanted as long as religion, politics, and sex weren't on display, according to the paper. Soon, artists from all over the world descended upon 5 Points, which is the place where this happened, and the increasingly colorful spot became a favorite backdrop for movies, music videos, weddings, and concerts, according to the Post, and became culturally recognized as well. When Wolkoff embarked on plans to replace the warehouses with high-rise luxury condos, the graffiti artists didn't like that too much. Cohen's application with the City Landmark Preservation Commission was rejected because the graffiti was too recent. Cohen's attempt at a preliminary injunction against Wolkoff under the Visual Artists' Rights Act was denied in court, but it did say an opinion would come within 8 days. But before those 8 days were over, Wolkoff ordered the graffiti painted over, and a year later the structure was torn down. So let's say this again. A guy owns property. He allows people to graffiti on his property as artists. The guy says that he wants to do away with the building to build high-rise apartments. And suddenly, these people who have their graffiti on this man's personal property are demanding that he doesn't tear down the structures because that would be illegal to them. Okay? This goes to court. Artist Akiko Miyakami, just so you know, I can actually get that out, said when she saw her work painted over, she felt as though she was raped. The Post reported, citing court documents. Does rape even hold the same meaning anymore after idiots like this abuse such a heavily weighted word that is supposed to represent such a heinous crime? This is exactly why the whole Me Too movement starts to fall apart at the seams in some places. Yes, there is sexual harassment. Yes, there is abuse. Yes, there is rape. Yes, men take advantage of certain situations in the work environment and other places of women and do despicable things. But when things are labeled as rape or sexual abuse or sexual harassment that clearly fall not within those guidelines, you are doing a disservice to the actual core that I may even agree with the feminist movement, and completely botching things up, okay? If you're going to compare your art being painted over by the actual property owner as rape, you need to sit down and actually talk to someone who is raped, okay? Because there is no reason that those words should ever come out of your mouth. A U.S. District Court jury found in November that 36 of the 40 graffiti murals at 5 Points should be protected under the Federal Visual Artists' Rights Act and had achieved recognized stature, according to the paper. The ruling was a recommendation for the presiding federal judge, Frederick Block, who ruled on Monday that another 9 artistic works should be protected by law, bringing the total to 45, and that 21 artists should get nearly $7 million in damages, the maximum amount allowable. So these artists are getting $7 million each. Is that what I'm reading right here? No, okay, $7 million total, apparently. So between all these artists, they're making a lot of money. Here, I'm going to take a minute here to actually go through and do it. So they're each getting about $150,000 each, which in Pennsylvania here, you could get a pretty nice home for, okay? Because they were allowed to draw on the walls. I'm just imagining here, sitting in my house and watching one of my kids as a toddler draw on the wall and considering that protected art. I may be the homeowner, but I should let that go because that kid drew some art right there, and by golly, no one should ever be allowed to erase it. This is so ridiculous. I can't believe this made it to court, and it's just another sign of our legal system falling apart absolutely everywhere. I don't think there's anything else to be said about this. So, while we're speaking of crazy people in our society and a big "I told you this was coming" which we've been saying all year, a man with an antenna in his head wants the government to recognize people who identify as non-human cyborgs. A man with an antenna permanently implanted in his head is pushing for governments to officially recognize people who identify themselves as non-human cyborgs, part human and part robot. More people are going to have robotic body parts, and governments should begin to accept these changes, says Neil Harbison, who lives in New York City. What do you know? He lives in New York City. Maybe this guy has a laser attachment to his wrist where he etched some art into one of the freaking murals at 5 Points. And what did I tell you? California, New York, New Jersey, you get the idea. You know where we're going with this type of stuff. Harbison had the antenna installed in his head to help him cope with achromatopsia, a condition that allows him to see only in black and white. The antenna has a sensor that dangles over his forehead and translates light waves into vibrations that his brain has learned to decode, according to the Daily Mail. So if you're looking at the picture of him right now, you're literally seeing him look like one of those deep sea fish creatures with the light bulb that hangs down in front of him that attracts other fish. This is a warning sign. You saw it in Finding Nemo. Stay away from this dude, okay? He's going to lure you in with that, and you're going to be dazed and confused, and he's going to get you. He's going to get you. That's what another thing with these cyborgs do, I'm telling you. He said, I have an antenna that is implanted inside my head, which allows me to extend my perception of reality beyond the visual spectrum. You're starting to go down that hill. Here we go. Stay with me. Hold on for the ride here. I can sense infrared and ultraviolet, and I have an internet connection in my head that allows me to receive colors from other parts of the world or connect to satellites so I can send colors from space. Harbison claims his Wi-Fi antenna essentially enables him to travel to different parts of the universe. Oh, I can't. Suddenly, my sense of color is not on Earth anymore, but in space. This allows me to explore colors of space without having to go there. I call this becoming an astronaut. Instead of physically going and exploring space, we can explore space by sending our senses there. Eat your heart out, Elon Musk. This guy has been to the outer rims of our galaxy, and you're still just shooting Teslas into space. Harbison, who's 33, has been making headlines since he had the device permanently implanted in his skull in 2004. His head was drilled 4 times to have the antenna installed. I believe there's a drilling procedure that you could do like right through the front area here by your nose for people like this. They used to do it back in the day called a lobotomy. Harbison founded the Cyborg Society and the Transspecies Society, which allow people to identify as non-human. There you have it, folks. Transgender, transracial, trans species. We've had people that identify as cats and dogs and lizards. Now transborg. Let's just call it transborg, like the Transformers. Wait a minute. Maybe that's something that needs to be investigated right there. Okay. So let's talk about some politics now. San Francisco is experiencing a mass exodus, and the city's liberal policies are said to be to blame. Tens of thousands of residents leave the Bay Area while an influx of immigrants flood the sanctuary city, according to KPIX TV. For the first time in decades, more people are leaving San Francisco than there are new people moving into the city. The mass exodus has propelled the Bay Area to the nation's leading city for out-migration. According to the Mercury News, the median price for homes in Silicon Valley fell anywhere between $800,000 to more than $1.4 million. That's compared to the U.S. average of $206,000. San Francisco has also become one of the most progressive cities in the nation over the last few decades, culturally and politically, meaning liberal policies rule the day. The city is also heavily taxed. But another large contributor to the problem, no doubt, is the city's sanctuary city policy. It was the center of a national controversy after an undocumented immigrant murdered Kate Steinle in 2015, which was something that we also talked about on the podcast. Now, if this is your first time on the podcast or first time tuning in and listening about politics and everything, sanctuary cities, just so you understand the term and don't have to look it up, is basically defined as a city that allows illegal immigrants into the city as a kind of, I hate to use this word, but safe zone for them. That's exactly what it is. We got to stick with the liberal policies and what they push. It is a safe zone where ICE officials and city officials and police officers and other law enforcement agencies in that city are not allowed to go after these illegal immigrants and deport them. There's even cases where people have gotten away with murder, like Kate Steinle's case, that they are already doing something illegal by being here, they commit a crime, and then they're set free. I mean, what more do you want at this point? One of the stories that we're not going to be getting to tonight is this whole budget issue that the Congress is going through right now, where President Trump is literally giving the Democrats everything that they want. As a matter of fact, he is giving the Democrats almost double what they were asking for, and they're still not signing off on it. And we talked about that before. Number one, they were looking for 800,000 illegal immigrants to stay in the United States. President Obama said, you know what, how about we give you 1.8 million? So 1 million more than double what they were asking for. Okay. We want them to be here and be considered legally here. Now, that's not legal status. That is just that they are legally allowed to be here. He said, hold on a second. Let's go a step further. Let's give all these people a pathway to citizenship so that they can actually become citizens and pay into the tax system. And what are the Democrats saying in regards to this? The only thing that President Trump asked in return for all of that, basically doubling down the Democratic policies, is that he wanted a wall built, or at least part of the wall built. And they're refusing to budge on this. Why would the Democrats be refusing to budge and give President Trump what they want? Why would they not give him what they want? That sounds like such a stupid thing to say. But the fact is, he is giving them everything that they want, and they're not taking it. Why wouldn't they take it? Well, it's a very simple reason why. Because they don't actually care about the people that are here illegally. They don't care about the illegal immigrants. What they do care about is the votes that they would get if they were seen as the heroes to pass such legislation. So the fact that if this were passed as an idea of Trump's and as Trump's olive branch to the Democrats, it would be seen as President Trump being the hero in the situation and possibly flipping the script on who those people would end up voting for. Any questions? No, because that is exactly what's happening. There's a lot going on there. Anyway, let's see. Between July 2015 and July 2017, the region gained 44,732 immigrants, but lost 44,102 residents to other parts of California and the country, according to the regional think tank. The population drops have been most notable on residents between the ages of 18 and 24 and between 45 and 64. Carol DeBach is a retired engineer and has lived in the area for 40 years. Now she's moving to Tennessee. I loved to hear when I first got here. I really loved to hear. But it's just not the same, she said to KPIX. We don't like it here anymore. You know, we don't like the sanctuary state status and just the politics here. Beyond the politics of accepting and protecting so many illegal immigrants into the city itself, one of the other problems that California as a whole is seeing, especially within their cities, the major cities like San Francisco, are things like the overpopulation and booming population of the homeless people within those cities, okay? are so many, it's actually become almost like an epidemic in the city. And it's something that's not being reported by the media at all. It's a horrible problem where there are areas of cities where there are urine and feces streams in the streets, and the city absolutely stinks in some places, according to some of my California friends that live out there. As a matter of fact, we're going to interview Kira at CPAC next week. By the way, the podcast will be down at CPAC next week, so we have a lot of really cool things going on down there. And she's going to talk to us about California politics and what's actually been going on out there. And one of the things that we both agreed on that it would be a great topic is the homeless population out there, and that it's booming, and that liberal policies are failing these things. And the fact that you see this exact situation. This is exactly what we've talked about in the past. We have a booming population of immigrants coming into the city that are illegally there, as well as a booming population of homeless people. And instead of making policies and trying to push for things that protect and house these homeless Americans in the city, instead the Democrat politicians are turning around and saying that we need to instead protect the people that are illegally here and get them education and home and housing and everything. Well, what about the American people? When Nancy Pelosi stood up in front of Congress and gave an 8-hour speech in regards to illegal immigrants, where has she been for her own people in California that are homeless? Where has the grandstanding been then? Here's the fact of the matter, okay? The Congress people on either side stood up and did two things when they assumed office. They made it their word to protect the Constitution of the United States, okay? And both sides have ripped it to shreds over the past decades, okay? The other thing that they go there to do is actually represent the American people in their districts. So, if that is your main priority, is the American people, Donald Trump isn't too far off the mark. You may not like his America First slogan, but as a politician, that's what you're there to do. You are there to represent the American people, not the people of Mexico, not the people of Denmark or Venezuela or Cuba. You can certainly discuss policies that affect foreign people in other countries that should be taken care of by their own countries. First of all, let's talk about that being the problem right there. They need to be focusing on the American people first, and if we can get that all under the right umbrella where everything's going smooth here in America first, then we can start focusing on these other people. I'm not saying be callous and push these people off to the side and don't care about them. By and large, the American population, the American country, is one of the most charitable, it is the most charitable country by and large, far and above any other country in charitable giving to other countries and within this country itself, okay? Other countries, especially socialist countries, have become so dependent upon the government system of that country that philanthropy has virtually gone away. And there is no giving in those countries anymore. So our country gives on the personal basis out of our own wallets more than any other country out there. Not to mention all the other stuff that these organizations and government itself does for other countries as well, through relief efforts and other places like the UN as well. So yes, in regards to California, people like Nancy Pelosi and Barbara Boxer and Maxine Waters and all you other progressive liberal politicians that are out there that are standing up for these illegal immigrants, you want to do that? That's fine. Take care of the American people, especially those within your district first. Get the homeless people under control. And by under control, I don't mean shove them off into dark places and get rid of the problem. I'm talking about taking care of the problem. Take care of the homeless people that you have out in your districts right now, and then you can start focusing on the people that are here illegally. A Daily Wire headline says it all. Pocahontas Warren makes a surprise appearance at a Native American conference and plays the victim. So we're always joking about Pocahontas Warren all the time, ever since Donald Trump gave her that label, because it's the gift that keeps on giving for this woman. On Wednesday, Senator Elizabeth Pocahontas Warren, a Democrat from Massachusetts, sent some presidential smoke signals. Damn, that's my line. I used that line in one of my last podcasts. Daily Wire stealing my stuff. With a surprise appearance at the National Congress of American Indians. There, she attempted to rebut the accusations as she fabricated Native American heritage for personal gain. She still claims she has Cherokee ancestry without a shred of evidence to support the contention, and she likely used that fake ancestry to win a post at Harvard Law School. In the past, she's defended her supposed ancestry by pointing to her high cheekbones and her recipe submission in Pow Wow Chow. So if you're not familiar with the story and why this is such a running joke with President Trump, is that Elizabeth Warren, if you've ever filled out an application process where you have to fill out your ethnicity and everything, has marked down that she's a Native American on multiple occasions, and even put together a book called Pow Wow Chow of Native American recipes, as she says, were from her grandmother, which actually turned out to be plagiarized from another cookbook, apparently. But on top of that, she got into Harvard Law School possibly, and this isn't confirmed, but possibly as an affirmative type action based on her ethnicity being marked down as a Native American. And this woman couldn't be any more white. She is a very white New England person. So it's just amazing. So Warren stated, here's some of the things that she said. My mother's family was part Native American, and my daddy's parents were bitterly opposed to their relationship. So in 1932, when mother was 19 and daddy had just turned 20, they eloped. Well, does it sound like she's coming off as like Southern with the way she's talking here? The story they lived will always be a part of me, and no one, not even the President of the United States, will ever take that part of me away. Well, it's kind of hard to take away when it was never really there at all. I get why some people think there's hay to be made here. You won't find my family members on any rolls, and I'm not enrolled in a tribe, and I want to make something clear. I respect that distinction. I understand that tribal membership is determined by tribes, and only by tribes. So I'm here today to make a promise. Every time someone brings up my family's story, I'm going to use it to lift up the story of your families and your communities. Oh boy. So Ben Shapiro, who's one of my political heroes, makes a fantastic point about this, and he said, the same left that moans endlessly about cultural appropriation apparently has no problem with one of their leading figures pretending to be Native American, then hiding behind actual Native Americans to defend the use of the gimmick. The same left that cherishes identity politics will apparently allow a white woman to pretend to be Native American if it forwards their anti-Trump agenda. All of which shows that, for the left, identity politics is a tool, not an end, and that should make racial and ethnic groups feel used, not honored. On February 8th, Congress passed a bipartisan budget deal that will increase government spending caps by $300 billion in the next 2 years. Well, you would think that if we had Republicans in control, we'd actually get the spending under control too. But once again, it's proven time and time again that no matter who's in office, spending is always the issue. But there is some light in the darkness. Senator Rand Paul, the Republican of Kentucky, was one lawmaker trying to stop the government from spending us into oblivion, but he was overruled. What you are seeing is recklessness being passed off as bipartisanship, he said. Paul described a ridiculous example of wasteful government spending, a natural gas fuel station in Afghanistan that nobody could use. That's $45 million in taxpayer dollars down the drain that supposedly went to reduce the carbon footprint. So let's take a look at that video and see what Rand Paul had to say. And if this doesn't make your blood boil, I don't know what will.
The Department of Defense, last year, we found this out, spent $45 million on a natural gas station in Afghanistan. $45 million. It was projected to cost $500,000. 86 some odd overruns, of cost overruns, $45 million. So you're scratching your head and you're saying, natural gas station, what is that? We don't have one in my town. We don't have any in my town either. They didn't have any in Afghanistan, but you know what? They decided that they needed to reduce the carbon footprint of Afghanistan.
Oh, dear God.
All right? They wanted to reduce the carbon footprint of Afghanistan. I thought the military's job was to kill the enemy. So the military's job now is to reduce their carbon footprint? So they bought a $45 million gas station that serves up natural gas, and guess what they discovered? They kept waiting. So there's a guy sitting next to the pump. You can imagine him sitting on a stool, and he's waiting for customers. No one ever came. And then someone said, oh my goodness, they don't have any cars that run on natural gas. Well, that would probably be the same if you came to my town in Kentucky. Almost nobody's got a car in America. They live in a primitive state in Afghanistan, and you're expecting them to have natural gas cars? So they said, well, gosh, we already built this $45 million gas station.
Dear God, no.
Maybe we should buy them some cars.
Oh, my
So
gosh.
they bought them some cars with your money. They paid for the gas station with your money. Now they bought them some cars with your money. But then the people still wouldn't come in. They said, we don't have any money. And they said, okay, well, we've got the gas station. We've got your cars. You need a credit card. So we gave them credit cards. So they have a U.S. credit card that you pay for to take their natural gas car that you paid for to go to a natural gas station because we're reducing the carbon footprint in Afghanistan.
Is that not one of the most incredibly ridiculous things that you have ever heard? I mean, one of the things I've talked about for years now in regards to the reckless spending that our government does is in regards to pork projects and what these senators try to tie to the bills in order to blackmail their bills getting passed. In essence, what happens is if I introduce a bill for $5 million to do something, whatever it is, and I need the support of other senators, and I go to them and ask for their support, typically what will happen is one of those senators will say, yeah, I agree with you on that, okay, but in order for me to vote for your bill, I'm going to need an additional $1 million for my community where, no lie, this is actually here's some examples. I want $1 million to build pipe tunnels under the highways so that turtles can cross the highways safely by going underneath them. As if you can somehow send a message to the turtles to specifically go to those areas and use those tunnels instead of going over the road. Or, for instance, we spent millions of dollars researching the mating habits of salmon out in California. We spent millions of dollars on an airport in this one area where no planes ever fly in or out of it. It was basically for the private use of people that probably paid off the politicians of that area. So, in order to get bills passed, this is exactly the sausage-making process that people always talk about, is to do a $5 million bill, it'll inflate up to $30 million just to get the support behind it to actually get something passed. Even though those people are saying, yes, I agree with you, I think that should be done too, but listen, I'm not going to be able to get my stuff passed if I was just to propose it on my own. Who's gonna put together a bill for turtle tunnels and think that would actually be able to garner enough votes to actually pass in Congress on its own? So obviously I have to tie it to something else. Well, no, the merit of the bill that's being introduced should be merit enough. It's time to end all this reckless spending. And if you think that we have a problem in America where we have this mentality right now where we need to be charging, or not charging, but basically taxing the rich more and more to support a system that you feel is failing the people because we're not spending enough money on people, my word, let's get the spending actually under control. Okay, before you start going to people to pay out more money to fix the problem, how about we pull back on the spending of other crap that we shouldn't be spending on and reallocating that to things that you may feel are more important? Listen, I'm against universal health care. I'm against free college tuition because I don't think it's needed, okay? A lot of the people that go to college don't actually end up working in that field. So it's actually a deterrent or an encouragement, I would say, for you if you're paying for that schooling to actually pursue that career and set a good concrete mindset that that's what you're going to be pursuing. But then you also have people that never end up going to college because they don't need to. Some of the careers that are out there have better opportunities by being an apprentice for something. As a matter of fact, in most cases, you can learn more by being on the job and apprenticing or shadowing someone for a short period of time than you ever could in college with all the extra nonsense bullcrap that they teach you to keep you in school longer. Most of the 4-year degrees out there could be achieved in a matter of 2 years if they cut everything else out of there that they say makes a rounded individual. That's not really true, okay? It's not. If the kids want to learn about that stuff, they should be able to learn about it on their own time or pay for additional classes, but it shouldn't be required for the degrees. You want to talk about education and tuition being so expensive. I know we're getting off topic here, but tuition being so expensive for colleges is because they inflate it by so much to add all this extra stuff, so you have to go for multiple years that you don't even need to necessarily be there, because you could have gotten the degree 2 years earlier if you didn't have to take social welfare classes, for crying out loud. If you're going for marketing, doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense why you would have to do that. So we could do all these things. We could cut down on the cost of college. We could cut down on the cost of healthcare in America if we could all get together as a people and take a look at this situation and say together, my word, people, we don't need to be spending money on this stupid stuff like a $45 million freaking dollar gas station out in Afghanistan that people couldn't use anyway, that we then paid even more money to then go and buy cars for those people who didn't have money to even drive those cars, and then we had to give them American credit cards to do that, all to reduce a carbon footprint. I have to tell you, the production of those cars, the building of that fuel station, and the fact that we're over there at all, the back and forth between that, the carbon footprint that was created to get rid of a carbon footprint is going to take years at this point to come back from. But we need to get together as an American society and realize that some things just shouldn't have money spent on them. We need to figure out a way to come up with a grant situation through private organizations that have a vested interest in the outcomes of the types of things that they want these pet projects spent on, and give an opportunity for people to seek out those grants to actually do that through those businesses that would actually pay for such results. Again, our government is not supposed to be, just like our public schools are not supposed to be, a social experiment. That's not what we're going for here. We can take so much money that's already there being wasted and put it towards things that will make both sides happy, okay? Instead of raising taxes on people, which is always the Democrat solution, to get more stuff, we can allocate that wasteful spending towards the things that they actually think are necessary. And if the Democrats actually believed, politician-wise, that these things were important, they would be the first ones in line to take a look at the line items in their budgets and say, this is wasteful spending. If this is actually important to us, then we need to take from this over here and allocate it over here instead. And that just goes to show you why it's called sausage making in our American culture. Okay, let's talk about the National Portrait Gallery on Monday unveiled portraits of former President Barack Obama and First Lady Michelle Obama to a very mixed reception, to say the least. So even though Barack Obama praised Baltimore-based artist Amy Sherald for spectacularly capturing the grace and beauty and intelligence and charm and the hotness of the woman I love, many critics on social media slammed the rendition of the former First Lady. For the portrait, the former First Lady was painted in grayscale, a charcoal color with taupe undertones. She's seated with her hair falling around her shoulders in a bold, floor-length dress. After her portrait was unveiled, the former First Lady said she was a little overwhelmed, to say the least. That's not exactly a compliment. She added, "I'm also thinking about all the young people, particularly girls of color, who in years ahead will come to this place and they will look up and they will see an image of someone who looks like them hanging on the wall." Something that the First Lady herself can't actually even claim. Because if you're looking at her picture here, this looks nothing like Michelle Obama. It's horrible. Not to say that the woman in the picture isn't a very pretty woman. That's not the case. It just does not look like Michelle. Bill Colon tweeted, "President Obama and former First Lady Michelle Obama's portraits were just unveiled. Is it a joke? Hashtag not my portrait." Eugene Goom, MD, tweeted, "Michelle Obama is an elegant lady and the portrait looks nice, but clearly the artist drew someone else." Sherald, first prize winner of the Portrait Gallery's 2016 Outwin Bouchevier portrait competition, beat out 2,500 other artists to paint Michelle Obama. Let's head over to Barack Obama's portrait. It was painted by Kehinde Wiley, and it features a 7-foot portrait sitting in a field of flowers, including a special one, chrysanthemums, the official flower of Chicago. Yikes. Jasmine, a nod to Obama's childhood in Hawaii, and African blue lilies to symbolize Obama's late father, who was from Kenya. Now, stop the jokes about Obama being from Kenya. Both paintings were unveiled at the gallery, which is part of the Smithsonian Group of museums. The gallery has a complete collection of presidential portraits. Now, just like I had earlier at one of the topics in regards to the Black Panther movie coming out, that more news has come out since then, another story has come out in regards to these portraits as well. The guy who did the painting of President Obama is also famous for doing portraits of minorities holding the beheaded heads of white victims. So, is there no vetting of this stuff anymore before they go on with this kind of stuff? I mean, what was the criteria in order for these two to win out over other people? And do they not look back at the previous works of art to make sure that this doesn't become a news story, for crying out loud? Like, I don't care what this artist does. I mean, it's in there. It's every right of theirs. You know, God willing, hopefully they're painting it and not actually doing it. Let's leave it at that, you know? But the fact that they don't do any research to say, hey, you know, guys, I know I drew this name out of the hat, and I'm looking here. I did a simple Google search. And I'm seeing that this guy, he kind of likes to paint people beheading white people. I don't know. You know, if we do this, President Obama is going to be tied to that, and I don't know if that's such a good idea. Does it take that much to actually put some thought and intellectual into the process to actually come up with this and say, maybe not a good idea? Yeah, we'll pull another one out of the hat here. We never did that one. Okay, what do we got here? Find a different one. Oh boy, so just unbelievable. There's such a lack of effort in things anymore. It's unbelievable to me. Okay. So some of this stuff was pretty lighthearted. But in our main topic tonight, we're talking about at least 17 were killed in Florida shooting at a school down there. A heavily armed 19-year-old who had been expelled from a South Florida high school opened fire on campus shortly before classes let out on Wednesday, killing 17 people while terrified students barricaded themselves inside classroom, according to police. The violence unfolded at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High, a school of more than 3,000 students in an affluent suburb northwest of Fort Lauderdale, where houses sit on broad lots. The suspect was captured after a manhunt that transfixed the region and forced a nearby school into a lockdown, said Broward County Sheriff Scott Israel. Students recalled the terror and confusion in the aftermath of the shooting. "We had a fire drill earlier in the day, so we really didn't know what was going on," said Ryan Cadell, a 17-year-old senior. We went outside and we saw a security guard on a golf cart driving really fast and yelling at us to run. The gunman started firing before even entering the school, leaving a trail of carnage across the sprawling campus, Israel said. A dozen of the dead were found inside the school and 3 were found outside. 2 others died from their injuries at a hospital. By 9 p.m. on Wednesday, 12 of the victims had been identified. At some point during the school year, the school administration sent out a note with a vague suggestion of alarm, asking teachers to keep an eye on crews. I don't recall the exact message, but it was an email notice that they sent out, said one of the teachers. So, this was a while ago. And, okay, I did mention his name. I didn't want to, though. We have a real problem in this country with these types of incidents that are happening because these people are actually looking for recognition and they're looking to be known as the person that killed so many people. It has literally become a game to see who can kill the most people. That's one of the most disturbing aspects of what's going on. So to take away from that, what I and others have decided to do is just stop naming these people that are the suspects in such a thing. It takes the power away from it because they want to live in infamy on this. They want to be known as the person who killed this many people. And I don't want to play that game. I don't want to give them that type of credit. So we're already seeing a pattern of behavior here where the school administration sent out a note earlier that year saying that this guy was a problem. And no one listened to it. No one followed up on it. Well, it gets even worse than that. An Instagram account that appeared to belong to the suspect showed several photos of guns. One appeared to show a gun's holographic laser sight pointed at a neighborhood street. A second showed at least 6 rifles and handguns laid out on a bed with the caption, "Arsenal." Other pictures showed a box of large caliber rounds with the caption, "Cost me $30. One of the most disturbing appeared to show a dead frog's bloodied corpse. That one specifically, he said that his dog must have eaten one of them and it got it sick and died or something like that, so he would say he was getting revenge on it. Nicole said the incident was made all the more confusing because the school had recently held an assembly on emergencies. So here's where things are, just the irony of how it all went down is pretty disturbing as well. They were telling us what to do in a code red, a code yellow, and all that stuff. And then we had a fire drill in the morning, and that was normal. And then this afternoon, I was in one of the portables, and they said it was a code red. Nobody knew what to believe. Adding to the confusion, security officers had told the students at the assembly that they might have a drill during which police would fire blank shots to simulate gunfire, Ryan said. So here, things just unfolded in the most unlikely of ways where, can you imagine the confusion of the kids and the teachers and everything where they know that there's going to be simulated gunfire possibly in the afternoon and police presence, and instead they run out into actual line of fire because it all happened to go down the same day. It's really disturbing, and it's a collision of events that all happened at the same time. But things actually got worse because while the school was recognizing that this kid had some bad behavior problems, there was more as well. So let me get to that in just a second here. Okay, so we're seeing a pattern of behavior here. And number one, the schools were saying that this kid was a problem. The Instagram account is showing some issues with him with guns. There were some things on there that were questionable to people. But also, the FBI was warned multiple times about the suspect prior to the school shooting on Wednesday. We're going to go over a lot here. An agent said on Thursday that an investigation into the YouTube user was unsuccessful in identifying the person behind the account. "I'm going to be a professional school shooter," wrote this suspect on a video that had been shared by YouTube vlogger Ben Benight. Benight reached out to the FBI after seeing the comment, but was unable to reach them because the tips@fbi.gov email address came back as invalid. Although he says he gets a lot of weird comments, Benight flagged this one and sent it to the FBI immediately. FBI agents at a local field office contacted him about the threat the next day. They came to my office the next morning and asked me if I knew anything about the person, Benight told BuzzFeed. I didn't. They took a copy of the screenshot that was the last I heard from them. The issue seems to be, however, that the FBI never made a connection between Benight's report and other reports made to state and federal law enforcement agencies, including local branch offices of the FBI near Parkland, Florida, naming the same kid. Okay, so before we go on, let's get something very clear here. This kid is being recognized by people all over the place as being a problem, okay? So we're just painting a picture here, not the Obama portrait. We're painting another picture. And he made a comment about being a professional school shooter on someone else's YouTube video. The guy flags it. He contacts the FBI, which is stand-up of this vlogger to do. The first time he tries doing it, it doesn't even go through because the email address that the FBI gave on a website for tips is invalid. Okay. We're going to talk about that in competency. First of all, no, let's talk about it right now. We are trying to have a debate in America after every single one of these school shootings about giving the government more control to take away guns and rights, just basic rights, away from the American people. And you expect a government that can't run the post office correctly and can't handle this type of information where they were giving it to them to look into this kid. You want to give that government agency, those people, the control over our lives to take away our rights and everything? And you expect it to go well then? It's amazing that we expect people who break the laws to not break new laws that we put into place for them. But here we're talking about this too. They said the FBI connection between Benight's report and other reports made to state and federal law enforcement agencies. So state and federal law enforcement agencies beyond the FBI were all given information about this kid. If there's one thing that sold the right back in the early 2000s about the Patriot Act, it was that we were going to be bringing information all together in circular fashion between multiple government agencies so that they could distinguish information. It was the age of information to be able to take these things and identify threats through multiple levels of investigation, basically, okay? That the FBI could talk to the CIA, could talk to this other organization, the NSA, and all these things going on, including the military, so that if one had to pick up on something, that immediately flags would be raised if someone else was searching for the same person or group within those areas. So the fact that multiple agencies in this case were aware of this kid's tendencies and red flags were raised all over the place, and that they still couldn't find a way to connect the dots, is just another reason why this was just doomed to fail from the get-go. And another reason why I say that giving this kind of control over to agencies that can't even get their information right is a false way of going about things. So it says, at the same time, the suspect began posting multiple images of himself holding guns and wearing face masks on his Instagram account. Senator Chris Murphy, a Democrat of Connecticut, responded on Wednesday to reports of a shooting at the Florida high school, saying such shootings occur in the U.S. as a consequence of our inaction on gun violence. He said this happens nowhere else other than the United States of America. This epidemic of mass slaughter, this scourge of school shooting after school shooting, he said this on the Senate floor. It only happens here not because of coincidence, not because of bad luck, but as a consequence of our inaction. We are responsible for a level of mass atrocity that happens in this country with zero parallel anywhere else. As a parent, it scares me to death that this body doesn't take seriously the safety of my children, and it seems like a lot of parents in South Florida are going to be asking the same question later on today. So, if you take a look at other countries and what they go through with gun violence and school shootings and stuff like that, you can look to places like Israel where teachers are armed. And we're certainly going to talk about that in a little bit too when it comes to solutions and how we can go about these types of things in the future with a national discussion, not a demand from people. But Senator Chris Murphy has been trying to throw himself into the spotlight on multiple controversial issues over the last couple of years. We've talked about him on Obamacare was one of the big things that he was outspoken about, and completely used false statistics to push that narrative in a video that went viral by either Occupy Democrats or Now This, or one of those stupid sources on the internet. So someone else who chimed in on the event didn't come off as smart as most perceive him to be. Stephen King, the author, responded to Republican commentator Rick Wilson, who tweeted prior to the shooting, "You're a hell of a lot more likely to be killed in Florida by an opioid overdose than MS-13. So this tweet was actually sent out prior to the school shooting on the same day. So Stephen King probably saw this tweet and thought it was in regards to the shooting because he read it later on. I don't really know. But Stephen King responded with, "Don't tell that to the parents of the kids who got shot in Broward County today, sport." Meaning that he thought like the AR-15, MS-13 must be a firearm. So of course it's one of the worst and most dangerous gangs in the world that has exploded here in America due to a lax immigration policy and implementation of said policy. As a matter of fact, when Donald Trump was giving his State of the Union address and talking about MS-13, after or during that State of the Union address, the searches on Google for MS-13 shot up by a record 1,500% for those Google searches. And the reason being that we have a case where people aren't aware of what MS-13 even is because it's not mentioned in the media, and it is a very major problem. It's one of the worst gangs that has come from illegal immigrants into this country that started up. As a matter of fact, the initiation to get into the group, I believe, and I may be wrong on this, but I believe you have to kill someone to actually even become part of this group. And they have no remorse. And the media doesn't report on it because of being afraid of what the repercussions would be towards the liberal agenda and policies towards illegal immigration that they try to push with the Democrat politicians. And also, quite frankly, they're probably afraid for their lives too. They're afraid of the backlash from the MS-13 gang members themselves, which isn't uncommon when you look at what goes on in America. Okay, so let's talk about the actual numbers. Before we get into what we can see as solutions, we have to understand the actual statistics and facts, because right now there are two types of discussions going on: those based in facts and statistics, and those based on emotion. Everybody is emotional on this. What the left has to understand is that the right isn't callous in the loss of lives, okay? It's the fact that you have to be able to remove yourself from a situation and take the emotion out of it and look at what is being called for, which is the removal of a constitutional right, one of the founding blocks of foundation in our country within the Constitution. There's a very few things that are in there. And again, this is based on a document that doesn't give us rights. It gives us the ability to tell the government what they are not allowed to do to us. There's a very clear distinction there. The government is not allowed to take firearms away from you. It is your constitutional right to bear a firearm. And specifically, not for hunting reasons do we have firearms, specifically laid out in the Constitution, in the Bill of Rights, because our founding fathers saw it necessary in their fight against the ruling country at the time that they were escaping from and splitting themselves off from, that eventually the system that they set up could become tyrannical in some sort of way, and that we would need to be able to defend ourselves against our very own government. So this isn't about hunting, and it's never been about hunting, though if every zig is a zag and every zag is a zig, is every zag is ag, or it's not one of those arguments. Yes, it's in regards to hunting and everything too. That's a part of the equation, but this is actually about the protection of the citizens, the right to bear arms, the right to form a militia even, And it's not even about what type of firearm. These people make this distinction like, well, yes, the founding fathers said that you have the right to bear arms, but they obviously didn't mean automatic weapons and assault weapons and stuff like that, or bazooka launchers. Well, where does it say the right to bear arms except for those things? That's a very libertarian stance, by the way. I understand the need to limit some of those things. But right now, we have people calling for the ban of assault weapons. Okay, there was an assault weapons ban back in the 90s that failed. It didn't actually work, and people were doing it anyway because, lo and behold, people that break the laws, or criminals that broke the laws, continue to break the laws. Who would have thought? So the assault weapons ban never worked. Now they're trying to also push for semi-automatic weapons. Semi-automatic just means the fact that if you pull the trigger, you have to release and pull again for it to shoot. Okay? Whereas some, like a bolt action, you would have to reload and then pull the trigger, and reload and then pull the trigger. So that's the difference. So they are calling for an argument where they want to go back to basically old style revolvers where you have to pull back and release it to be able to pull the trigger, or bolt action rifles. That's what the argument is actually going for. That wouldn't even constitute being able to have having your standard 9mm protection pistol on you. That's a semi-automatic weapon. So that just goes to show you the derangement of the emotional, liberal, progressive left right now that's pushing for this type of legislation. Anyway, we're talking about numbers. So here's some perspective. Of the deaths in America, 0.6% are murders. Just murders, not associated with guns yet. Of that 0.6%, 99.7% are just murders. 0.3% of that 0.6% are murders from mass shootings. So that's how low of a number that is, okay? In regards to the homicide rate, overall firearms between 1999 and 2010, so this information is a little bit old, but by and large, if you actually have the ability to pull up the statistics, deaths from gun violence have been going down. It's been a constant trend of going down. Now, you won't see that in the media because the media actually feeds off of the headlines of if it bleeds, it leads. That's the old saying. They act and cry on TV when these types of things happen, but obviously that's when people are tuning in the most. That's when their ratings shoot up. They're eating up every portion of this. Just like the Democrats don't care about the illegal immigrants and they're just looking for the votes. No offense, there might be a little heart there for the media and everything, but by and large, they're just happy that people are actually tuning back into the news sources to get some more current information on what's going on with the school shooting than they are going to the social media and places, other places of alternative media where they've been going and abandoning these media sources of late. Okay, so we're looking at a graph here from 1999 to 2010 of the homicide rate. Overall homicide rate has been going down. Gun-related homicide rate is down below half of that, and that has also almost mirrored that rate going down as well over that same span of time. Okay, let's take a look at guns in the United States versus the total firearm-related violent crime victims. So, in regards to the total amount of guns in the United States, I think this has to be an old number here, but you're talking about 250 million guns in the United States. And of those violent crime victims, the guns that were used, it's barely registering on that right now at all on that graph. Okay, let's go into homicide rates in big cities. Well, look at these cities here. Chicago, Philadelphia, Houston, Los Angeles, and New York. The only one I'm actually surprised about is Houston there because it's in such a Republican state and the ability to carry down there. But every other city there, what is the growing theme right there? All liberally run cities that have their own bans in place on guns that have a high percentage of gun homicides. Once again, goes to show you that those that commit crimes don't really care about breaking the laws. And places like Chicago right there that have gun bans for years now are the ones that see so many deaths a day by gunshots. It's unbelievable. So Chicago right at the top there, and you work your way down. So all that being said, about 11,000 deaths per year in the U.S. are related to guns, okay? Those are related to guns. Now that number may seem high. I mean, it is, okay? But first of all, you have to take into account that that also includes suicides. It also includes accidental shootings. It includes homicides and a couple other different things that were thrown in there as well. So of that 11,000, 346 deaths were attributed to what are considered mass shootings, okay? Now, when you actually look at the data for what they consider mass shootings, they're talking about, in some cases, 2 to 3 people, 4 people. I'm sorry, I don't really consider that a mass shooting. I think that's inflation for the numbers. But even so, you're talking about 346 people attributed to the mass shootings. In comparison, we topped over 40,000 vehicle deaths in 2017. So more than 4 times the total amount of gun-related deaths in car accidents, okay? And you don't see anyone trying to ban that. We abort 3,000 babies a day in this country too. And you don't see anyone trying to stand up for those lives that are lost either. So let's talk about policies. Automatic rifles, machine guns have been tightly regulated at the federal level since 1934 and subjected to further restrictions since then. Regulation began with the National Firearms Act of 1934, which imposed a $200 tax on the manufacturer and transfer of shotguns and rifles having barrels less than 18 inches in length, certain firearms described as any other weapons, machine guns, and firearm mufflers and silencers at the federal level. States and localities have always been free to impose their own restrictions. So according to the ATF, or the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Agency, as the legislative history of the law discloses, its underlying purpose was to curtail, if not prohibit, transactions in NFA firearms. The law was amended in 1968 and then again in particular in 1986. The latter revision was to prohibit the transfer or possession of machine guns. Exceptions were made for transfers of machine guns to or possession of machine guns by government agencies and those lawfully possessed before the effective date of the prohibition, May 19th, 1986. So we're talking about like some pretty heavy-duty guns being completely banned since 1986, unless it was basically grandfathered in as like you had them before that law went into place. So go out and get your guns now, basically, is what it's saying. So for civilians, the only legally available automatic rifles in the United States under federal law come from the fixed pool of such weapons that existed on May 19th, 1986. With a limited supply shrinking at least a bit over time through attrition, prices for legal machine guns have no place to go but up. A glance at gunbroker.com, an online listing service with actual transfers handled by licensed dealers, so again going through the background checks and everything, reveals prices starting in 4 figures and rapidly going to 5 for individual weapons. So you're talking about here guns that are costing, these machine guns that were there prior to this ban, being able to be legally purchased that are thousands of dollars, if not tens of thousands of dollars. So when you're actually looking at these types of crimes being school crimes, school shootings, what kind of kid would be able to afford that kind of automatic rifle anyway? In most cases, it seems like the people who buy these types of guns are gun collectors. And by and large, if you look at the number of crimes committed by legal gun owners who have the license to carry and are responsible gun owners, the statistics are barely there for any crime at all. So could it be a matter of zoning in on mental health issues and keeping guns out of the hands of those that we classify as mentally unstable? That's one question that we can and should be asking and having a discussion on. But that discussion gets very muddy very quickly, and I'll tell you why. The problem is who classifies and what is considered mentally unstable. So who's classifying these people as mentally unstable, right? I would contend that under the Obama administration, Janet Napolitano classified Tea Party members, Republicans, church-going people, those that believe in small government as domestic terrorists. So would it be that much of a stretch of the imagination to say that an administration that would be in control like that would be able to take those types of things, just a political affiliation or the fact that you're a religious person, classify it as a mental illness like Joey Behar just did on The View, and say that those people are ineligible to actually own a firearm, okay? I'll take it a step further. Let's go down to a more local level and more noticeable level for more people on a personal level basis, okay? Is someone that has been seen a psychologist for depression after a divorce considered mentally unstable? If the symptom is temporary, is that a permanent blemish on your record in an attempt to purchase a firearm? So let's say you're a person. I've brought this up before on one of the podcasts. Let's say that you're a person who goes through a bitter divorce and it wasn't your fault. It was the other person who left you. You're still madly in love with that person, and it's just draining you mentally. You're in anguish, right? You go to a doctor because you're depressed about it. You're trying to seek help. And it's on record now that you have gone to a psychologist for a type of depression. Okay, let's say that within a time frame, whatever that may be, days, months, years, you come across someone that is another good fit for you and you get married to that person and you are happy again. Are they able, whoever this is that's classifying, and again, that's completely up in the air as far as who's classifying what a mental illness is, are they able to look back in those records and say, this guy was depressed at one point in time? That's an immediate denial right there. Is that fair? It's not. There are certainly unstable people out there that should never even look at a firearm, okay? I completely understand that, and that's why I'm saying this is not the end-all be-all. I'm not telling you what the solutions should be. I'm saying that there should be a discussion. We do a lot of talking in this country and shouting at each other out of pure hatred for opposition without doing very much listening at all. And if we would just sit and listen to each other, what are your concerns with this type of thing? Here are my concerns. Let's listen to each other. Let's try to work on some middle ground here, some common sense laws or actions that can make things better, okay? But the fact of the matter is, when you're actually looking at what's going on in the country right now, you're seeing that the liberal left is saying now is the time for a discussion on gun control. Now is a time for a national discussion. They are not asking for a discussion. What they are saying is we need to ban guns. We need to take guns away from people. That is not a discussion. That is a demand. Okay. When the left demands a conversation on gun control in the midst of this kind of chaos, they are deceiving at best. And as I said, a conversation consists of two parties talking things out. The left's only answer is to ban guns and take them out of the hands of millions of law-abiding citizens unconstitutionally, where it says that these rights shall not be infringed. What the left is going to say is that they want a conversation, but they are really saying that they are demanding the removal of these firearms, and they will settle for nothing less. Absolutely. Making decisions in the heat of emotion, being angry or upset, is a horrible way to pass policy legislation. The idea that people would say that these types of policies should be passed now because they wouldn't be in another month is saying all that there is that needs to be said. If it isn't a good idea to pass this a month from now when things calm down, it wasn't a good idea to pass it in the heat of the emotional time being right now either. A bad policy in the future isn't a good policy right now. If we were to have a conversation and actually discuss ideas to solve this, we would have to talk about other countries that don't see these types of events, that arm their teachers like Israel. How could that work? If not that, then lockdown procedures and armed security guards. And if not that, then why don't we hire veterans who are trained to work at the school as armed guards? So let's talk about arming the teachers for a second. Again, there's like this straw man argument and this rationalizing by people for what their idea of how that works. One of the teachers that I had back in high school, who I'm friends with on Facebook, posted today, I would never ever consider being an armed teacher in a school. I'm not going to disagree with you on that. No one is saying that you should put a gun in the hand of every teacher in a school. That should be a personal right and responsibility that's a heavily weighted responsibility, and the decision of the individual involved. If you choose to not be an armed teacher, let's say that this is a policy that we could go with, okay? Just going off of those lines for a second. Let's say that schools decide on an individual basis that, yes, we are going to allow teachers to be armed. If you as a person are not comfortable with being an armed person in the school, I don't want you to be an armed teacher in the school. I do not want you to have a firearm. What we need to be looking at is people who are responsible gun owners and also teachers to consider going through a psychiatric evaluation, some sort of test, to see if they are a good fit to be around an environment of education and whatever those standards come out to be, and be armed, okay? Be a responsible gun owner. On top of that, they should be going through extensive training with, I would say, police officers, okay? Like a firearm instruction officer who can train those individuals to be properly handling those types of situations, how to maneuver around the student body in those situations, how to store a firearm properly, how to shoot properly, make sure that their aim is nailed down for that type of training. Okay, so let's say that isn't something that we want to go with, okay? Again, we're having a discussion here. If not that, then what about lockdown procedures, okay? And in the last couple of years, especially since these school shootings have taken off and been so recognized in the media and everything, there have been multiple companies that have come out with just fantastic devices to use in the schools. One of them is like this triangle type contraption that you put over the door lever hinge on the top, and it forces the door from opening up. Okay, it actually locks that into place. Another one kind of looks like the old club that you used to put on the steering wheel of cars and everything. It actually slides under the door frame and then zips out, locks into place, and creates a barrier for the door so the door can't be pushed open. So these are lockdown procedures that every classroom should probably have anyway. Okay, armed security guards. Since Columbine, most schools have gone through a procedural type look at what their security measures are. I know our local school here locks down all doors during the day except for one entrance, which is a double locked entrance by the secretaries for the school that allow people to come in. So I don't know how this kid got into this, and I understand that there were security guards of some sort at this school, so I don't know how that whole situation took place, that he was able to pull the fire alarm inside the building, unless it was outside, which wouldn't make sense either. But that's the situation that unfolded there. So armed security guards. Why can't we have armed security guards that are trained for these specific things within the school as well? So again, then if we're going to continue that discussion, and these two things, arming teachers, arming security guards, isn't something that you want to do, we have a plethora of military veterans in our country that are sitting around that want to be involved and still protect their country in some sort of way, that are a great resource for us to actually go out and pursue, that would want to protect one of our nation's treasures, which is our upcoming generations. Why not go to professional veterans, do the same type of evaluations and trainings and everything that these other people would have to go through that I mentioned before? Any type of psychiatric tests to see the stability of that person in firearms trainings to make sure that they are properly trained, even if they were veterans. Sometimes you need to brush up on those skills and work with police officers on updated techniques and everything. Those are people that would probably be happy to get out there and continue working in such an environment to protect kids. So let's talk about what doesn't work though, okay? What we're currently doing is not working. Okay, so that's why a discussion does need to be had. Gun-free zone signs have never stopped someone from actually doing something in a gun-free zone with a gun. Okay, the fact that we have Chicago and Baltimore, these places are cities that are considered gun-free zones, okay? Now they're cities where they ban guns, but by and large, when you look at the country as a whole, you're looking at places where the highest gun mortality rate or gun homicide rates are within these cities. 17 is a huge number. It's a frightening number for a school to go through, but in Chicago, the number is something like between 30 and 50 people a day are dying from gun homicides. It's ridiculous, and this is supposed to be a gun-free zone. So again, we go back to the fact that we are trying to pass more laws for criminals to abide by that are breaking the laws. They don't care about these laws, okay? So if the laws are going to be broken anyway by criminals, then basically you're not allowing people within the herd to become the sheepdogs and the protectors of the sheep. You're just turning everyone into the sheep, because if no one else is allowed to be armed and be the good guy with a gun that stops a bad guy with a gun, you're not taking the gun out of the hands of the bad guys anyway. Most of these are illegally purchased on the black market. They're stolen from legal gun owners, which, yes, again, we can talk about problems in our culture where, legal gun owners are irresponsibly putting their guns into places where they can easily be stolen and not in safes or anything like that. So these types of things are all types of discussions that we need to have, but obviously passing more laws when laws are being broken doesn't help the situation right now anyway, and it's not working. Okay, New York City is another one, obviously, too. While seemingly unrelated, the case of the California couple, the Turpins, who homeschooled their 13 children and were caught torturing them within the home's walls, has led to some in California to push for legislation to ban homeschooling. So I can tell you as one thing, as a family that homeschools, while we are praying for the families involved, there is a certain level of relief anytime these stories come across the TV, computer, or social media, and you realize that you don't have to be the ones worrying about your kids being in that environment and all the fear and worrying that would ensue if your child was in that school. This and Common Core, state standardized tests, indoctrination and undoing of morals and principles, and a sad state of affairs with social environments within the public education system should be enough for any parent to consider how to get their kids out of these places and seek alternative education at this point. We're looking at this case right now where Californians are looking to ban homeschooling because they consider one instance where a deranged, mentally unstable family of a couple tortured their kids to be the example of what happens in homeschooling. That's a dangerous situation. And in the meantime, they're saying, yeah, we need to get these kids out of the homeschool situation because they're being tortured in places like this and get them in the public education system. But then you have on the other end, within a couple weeks, the same people screaming, why are these kids have to go to these schools and worry about getting shot up? I can tell you one thing, you don't hear that much about homeschool shootings. That's for sure, okay? So all these things that we've been talking about all year, all these educational issues, my word, we talked about the banning of best friends in schools between America and Europe. We talked about the insane test that got one teacher fired in Florida and another one in Texas, with the asking of kids what their response would be if their dentist had HIV, or if their sister brought home a transgender boyfriend, or the fact that what would you do as a sixth grader if you went to a gay bar, or if someone invited you to a gay bar. You have the educational things that we talked about earlier with, just so many insane things going on in the public education system right now. And then you have to worry about these school shootings on top of it. There are ways that we can have a national discussion, but that can't happen if both sides aren't willing to actually discuss, sit down, listen, and talk about what their fears and reservations are. Right now, the reaction coming from the left is the fact based in emotion and what's going on with that. Whereas the other side of the conversation is, listen, we have constitutional rights in this country, and if you start to erode those, then other constitutional rights can go too. I certainly don't like Jimmy Kimmel getting up in front of people every time one of these incidents happens and he starts railing on people for being immoral people and allowing this stuff to happen. That's his right to say that. But if I say that the First Amendment should have limitations on his free speech, that he's able to say that, he would get pretty upset as well. And that's what we're talking about here, is a very serious slippery slope of taking away of constitutional rights and the erosion of those. If we allow that to be eaten away in one area, it will continue to be eaten away. And the fact of the matter is we live in a dangerous time where politicians on both the left and right, but I'm sorry to say, especially on the left, are trying to just shred our Constitution and become one with a mass kind of European system where they want to model everything off of that, while European countries are trying to model things after us because we are succeeding in so many areas. For all the faults that America has, we are doing things very right in many other areas. So I want to thank you guys for tuning in for the podcast. I appreciate you tuning in. I know that this was a pretty rough topic. I know that there's a lot of different angles that go into this. I'm sure as more information comes out and unfolds with all of this, there's going to be more things to talk about. As I said before, I don't really want to even mention the kid's name because I don't want to give him that recognition and fame that he is obviously looking for. The fact that today his lawyer put her arm around him and said that he fully recognizes what's going on. He's with it. He's completely torn apart by this whole thing, and he was hearing voices is bull. Okay, the fact that the FBI knew about this in prior local and federal agencies knew, his Instagram account has been showing this for months, shows that this type of behavior was obviously premeditated for this time and has been an ongoing issue as well. So it's all a bunch of nonsense that's falling under that. So like I said, I think we're going to continue to learn more and more about what's going on with this, but we'll keep on talking about it as more things come out. Again, I'm not going to mention his name though. And as for my co-host, I hope he gets better, and we'll see him on the not the next podcast, but the podcast after that. So again, next week I will be down at CPAC. We're going to be getting some really good interviews. As I mentioned, we mentioned California a bunch of times on here, and my friend Kira will be down at CPAC and really wants to sit down and actually talk California policy. So I think that'll be really interesting with her. She lives in the Los Angeles area, which is the bastion of insanity out there as it is anyway. So we'll talk to her about those things. I may have an interview lined up with the 1% magazine, one of the editors there. It's a magazine for Hispanic conservatives. So he got in touch with me just this past week, and we were talking back and forth, and he will be at CPAC, so I hope to get his take on things, and maybe a couple others as well. I'm going to try to set up things while we're down there. But tune in, because it's probably going to be a string of interviews and maybe some really cool stuff that we have going on down there. But until next time, have a great night, and God bless America.